September 17, 1939. Barely 2 weeks into World War II, Britain's pioneering aircraft carrier, HMS Courageous, once a symbol of naval innovation, vanished beneath the Atlantic in less than 20 minutes, claiming over 500 lives. As the Royal Navy's pride was severed by a single, unseen attack, decades of strategy unraveled in a single night, forcing a reckoning that changed naval warfare forever. How did a ship designed to lead a new era of sea power become the conflict's first great casualty? To uncover the roots of this disaster, we must return to the beginning, when Courageous was reborn for a war she was never meant to fight. Her keel was laid down on the 26th of March, 1915, on the banks of the River Tyne by Armstrong Whitworth, and she entered service as a battlecruiser, a product of Admiral Fisher's doctrine that speed could substitute for armor. At 786 feet 9 inches in length, with a beam of 81 feet and a draft of just under 26 feet, Courageous was built for rapid strikes, not for enduring punishment. Her original armament included 4 15-inch guns and a thin belt of armor, never more than 4 inches thick, running only amidships. In the aftermath of the First World War, the Royal Navy faced treaty limits and the dawn of air power. Courageous was selected for radical transformation. The conversion began at Devonport on the 29th of June, 1924. Over 4 years, her superstructure, gun turrets, and torpedo tubes were stripped away. In their place rose a 2-tiered hangar, each level 16 feet high and stretching 550 feet from bow to stern. 2 aircraft lifts, each 46 by 48 feet, connected the hangars to the flight deck above. The island tower, housing the bridge and funnel, was set to starboard, a feature that would soon become standard in carrier design. By the time she was recommissioned on the 21st of February, 1928, Courageous could carry as many as 48 aircraft, from the lumbering Blackburn Dart to the nimble Fairey Flycatcher. Yet beneath her modern silhouette, many of the old vulnerabilities remained. The main belt armor was retained but thinned, and it failed to extend to the bow or stern. The flight deck, built for aircraft operations, was only lightly plated, no match for bomb or torpedo blast. Below, the hull's original subdivision lingered from her days as a battlecruiser, leaving vast, open spaces in the hangar and insufficient watertight bulkheads to contain flooding. Internal torpedo protection was limited to a single longitudinal bulkhead, a far cry from the layered defenses of later carriers. Displacement rose to over 22,000 tons, but the trade-off was clear. Courageous gained the power of flight at the expense of robust protection. In the interwar years, she stood as a symbol of British innovation, fast, formidable, and, as time would reveal, fatally exposed. By the summer of 1939, the Royal Navy stood at the height of its power. With more battleships, cruisers, and carriers than any other fleet on Earth, Admiralty planners trusted in size and tradition to secure the Atlantic. Confidence ran high among senior officers, who believed that destroyer screens and aggressive patrols would keep the U-boat menace at bay. The doctrine was clear. Carriers like Courageous would serve as the centerpiece of hunter-killer groups, flanked by fast destroyers, sweeping the western approaches for any sign of a submerged threat. In those first weeks of war, Swordfish aircraft from Squadrons 811 and 822 rose from Courageous's decks in regular cycles, their crews searching the gray sea for periscopes or torpedo wakes. The carrier's presence alone was meant to project strength, a signal that British air power could strike at any submarine daring enough to surface. Escorting destroyers maintained tight formation. Their crews drilled in the use of ASTIC, early sonar, to detect and attack any contact below. The prevailing wisdom held that a ship as large and fast as Courageous, guarded by alert escorts and vigilant air patrols, was all but invulnerable to submarine attack. Admiralty orders emphasized aggressive action. Hunter-killer groups were to seek out U-boats, not merely defend convoys. This reflected a deep-seated belief in offensive spirit and the reliability of new technologies. The western approaches, stretching from the Irish coast into the open Atlantic, became the proving ground for this strategy. Day after day, Courageous and her escorts patrolled these waters, launching and recovering swordfish, always ready for a signal from shore or a sighting from the bridge. Yet beneath the surface, the enemy watched and waited. The Royal Navy's faith in its doctrine left little room for doubt. In the minds of many, the lessons of the last war still held sway. Submarines were dangerous to lone merchantmen, not to a fleet carrier under heavy guard. It was a conviction about to be tested in the cold waters west of Ireland. At 1950, on the 17th of September, 1939, Courageous turned into the wind to recover her swordfish aircraft, unaware that U-29, under Kapitän Leutnant Otto Schuhart, had been stalking her for over 2 hours. Submerged less than 3,000 yards off the carrier's port quarter, Schuhart seized the moment. 3 torpedoes left their tubes in swift succession, their wakes invisible in the gathering dusk. 2 struck home just abaft the island, tearing through the lightly protected hull. The blast knocked out all electrical power in an instant. Darkness swallowed the decks, alarms fell silent, and communication lines died. Below, compartments flooded as seawater rushed unchecked through the open spaces of the old battlecruiser hull. On the bridge, Captain McCaig-Jones and his officers tried to assess the damage, but with the ship listing sharply to port and no power for pumps or signals, their options vanished by the minute. Men rushed to their stations. Some tried to launch aircraft, but the deck was already canted, and the aircraft remained chained where they stood. Others struggled with lifeboats, the angle of the deck making every movement a fight against gravity. In the hangar, darkness and confusion reigned. Some aircrew never escaped the lower decks. Within minutes, Courageous heeled over further. Oil and debris began to spread across the surface, the smell of fuel mixing with the cold Atlantic air. Survivors later recalled the eerie calm. No sign of panic, just the urgent scramble for survival. The order to abandon ship passed by word of mouth, voices carrying over the roar of rushing water and the metallic groan of a dying ship. 19 minutes after the first torpedo struck, Courageous rolled onto her beam ends and slipped beneath the waves. For those left in the water, the night was only beginning. In the blackness that followed the sinking, the surface of the Atlantic became a desperate scene. HMS Ivanhoe and HMS Impulsive, the 2 destroyers still in company, raced through the oil-slicked debris, their searchlights sweeping for any sign of life. Crewmen hurled lifebelts and ropes over the rails, pulling men from the freezing water, many dazed, some badly burned, all coated in fuel. The Dutch liner Veendam and the freighter Collingsworth soon joined the effort, their crews braving worsening seas to haul survivors aboard. Each new arrival brought a fresh account: the sudden roar of the explosion, the struggle to reach the upper decks, the impossible angle of the sinking ship. One wardroom attendant later recalled swimming for over an hour and a half before he found a plank to cling to, then drifting with strangers in the dark until rescue came. Out of roughly 1,260 souls, 681 survived. The toll, 519 dead, including Captain McCaig-Jones, struck at the heart of naval towns across Britain. In Plymouth, families gathered around radios and telegrams, reading lists of the missing, hoping for a name not to appear. For many, the loss was unfathomable. The Royal Navy had not suffered a disaster of this scale since Jutland. As soon as the first reports reached the Admiralty, the shock was immediate and total. Senior staff convened through the night, reviewing signals and survivor accounts. By morning, orders had gone out. All fleet carriers were to be withdrawn from anti-submarine patrols. The doctrine that had sent Courageous to sea, carriers as hunter-killer flagships, was revoked in a single stroke. Instead, the Royal Navy would shift to escorted convoys and improved anti-submarine tactics, a direct response to the lessons written in Cold Water and loss. The tragedy of Courageous forced a reckoning, not just with the enemy, but with the limits of tradition and the price of underestimating a new kind of war. On September 17, 1939, HMS Courageous was lost with 519 lives, a number confirmed by naval records. The sinking exposed fatal gaps in British anti-submarine doctrine and directly led to the withdrawal of carriers from solo anti-submarine patrols, a decision documented in Admiralty orders just days after the disaster. Survivor accounts and official reports detail the confusion and bravery that defined those final 18 minutes. Yet many personal stories from that night remain untold, and some wartime Admiralty communications about the incident are still not fully declassified. The rediscovery of Courageous in 1999, over 60 years later, finally marked her resting place and reaffirmed her status as a war grave. Today, her loss stands as a documented warning. Naval innovation can bring both strength and unforeseen vulnerability. The lessons written in the records of HMS Courageous continue to inform naval strategy and memorialize the cost of early war overconfidence.